City University Television. In association with the Center for Advanced Study in Theater Arts. And the Harold Clurman Endowment. Presents Spotlight.
Welcome to the Harold Clurman Seminar on Theater. I'm Ed Wilson, and my guest is one of the country's foremost writers and directors in both theater and film, the multi-talented Mr. Garson Kanin. Garson, welcome.
Thank you.
You had a tremendous success. I guess it was your first play on Broadway, was it? Born Yesterday?
Indeed.
Is that your first Broadway play?
It was.
In 1946?
Yes.
How did it happen that your first play, do you think, was such a huge success?
Innocence.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was in the Army, and I was overseas, and although I was given plenty to do in the way of duties toward the end, I was in the Army for a little over 5 years, and most of it I didn't do much. But in the last 2 years, I somehow did get involved through the good offices of General Eisenhower. I got involved in the making of an important film, a documentary film called The True Glory.
Which won an Academy Award.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And my partner was the wonderful British film director, Carol Reed. And we worked together for almost 2 years on that film. And when it was finished, it, as you say, won all sorts of prizes. And what was the question?
The question was about Born Yesterday, how you got from that to the stage and how your first production was
So I was overseas, where I had been for a number of years, and working very hard on these documentaries and all the other duties of being shipped to Germany and to France and various parts of the war zones. But I got to the end of 1 year, and I began in the dark. You know, when you go to bed and the lights go out and you're lying there. It's almost universally a time of self-examination. Just by force of an old habit, when I go to bed, the lights go out. And what I do, first of all, is I review the day. I think of what I did that whole day, from morning until then. And then I begin to think about what I've been doing, or what I am doing, or what I hope to do, or what I fail to do. And it occurred to me this night that a whole year had gone by, and I hadn't really done one creative thing. I had done all my duties, and I'd worked on The True Glory, you know, but I hadn't really done anything. I hadn't written a screenplay.
It was just you, in other words.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna write a screenplay in whatever spare time I have. So I began to write a screenplay, and I knew all about that, having been a film director. And I knew all the angles. So I started to write a screenplay, and about a half or a third of the way through, a thought struck me that nearly knocked me out. The thought was that I was writing something that was never going to be produced. In the first place, it had a character of a venal senator. And at that time, you certainly couldn't have a man and a woman living together openly and traveling around without it happening.
Who were not married, they weren't married.
No.
Yeah.
They never are they?
No.
So,
but I meant in the original screenplay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I put it away rather sadly, and I thought, oh, hell, I got to think of something else. And then one night in that little thinking period, I thought, well, wait a minute. If it can't be a movie, maybe it could be a play. Because the theater, as you and I know, is the last free forum that exists in the world. There are no free forums. The theater is. Anyone can do a play about anything. And so I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll turn that into a play. And the next day, quite happily and with a lot of excitement, I started at the beginning and I turned it into a play. And having done so, I was all excited and I mailed it back via pouch to my wife, to Ruth Gordon, and she read it and she sent me a telegram because phoning was not possible. She wrote me a telegram and she said in the telegram one word, wonderful. Well, that was enough for me.
That's terrific, yeah.
Couldn't be happier than that. Because she was a tough baby, especially on me and on my work and on herself and on her work. So I was very pleased about that, and I began to think in terms of getting it on when the war was over. And I sent it to Max Gordon, and he communicated with me and said he liked it.
He was a producer, obviously,
Yes.
who you knew,
Oh,
Max
yes,
Gordon.
wonderful producer, key producer in the New York Theater. And then I began to think in terms of casting, as we always do. You and I were talking about casting in some of your own work recently,
Yes.
and it can be a key element.
Absolutely.
I mean, some very good plays have been ruined by the wrong casting, and some mediocre plays have made it because of inspired casting. So
Let me interrupt you for
Sure.
1 second right here, because you had written the play, but then you were going to be the director
Yes.
as well. And
Right.
was that understood from the beginning that you
Well,
would be the director? Because you
pretty-
had experience as a film director, a good deal of experience as a film director, and you'd also done some assistant directing for George Abbott on Broadway. But it was understood you were going to be the director of this as well.
Yeah, well, I had directed plays on Broadway
Right.
too. Yeah, and so I began to think about casting, and one of the first people that crossed my mind was my old friend Jean Arthur. I thought I loved her, and I loved her acting, and I loved her looks, and I loved her personality. And her husband was a great friend of mine named Frank Ross, and I sent the play to them, and they responded affirmatively. So we were sort of underway, and it looked like as soon as I got out of the Army, we'd get that play into production. I had a producer, I had a star, I had a play, a director. What else?
Exactly. You were ready to go.
So when I was discharged from the Army finally, we did indeed put the play right into rehearsal. In fact, if my memory serves, I think for the first 10 days or 2 weeks of the play, I was still in uniform.
Oh, really? You hadn't officially been discharged?
Yes, I hadn't been discharged yet.
So you didn't waste any time then?
Yes, no. There wasn't time. So there we were underway, and we went into rehearsal. We opened out of town. We did pretty well. Not wonderfully well, pretty well. What they call promising.
Promising, right. Now, and I presume that when you opened out of town, Jean Arthur, was she in the company at that point?
She was indeed. And very, very good she was, too. But then, trouble. The trouble was that Jean Arthur simply lost her confidence. She was terrified of going on the stage.
She'd been in films, hasn't she?
Yes, but she had been a very, very good stage actress as
yes,
well.
before.
And she just was tied up in nerves and couldn't function. So I went to her and her husband, Frank Ross, and I said, listen, why don't we put it away for a few months and think it out? And, no, she said she just couldn't do it. She just couldn't face. She was terrified of the audience. And I kept trying to talk her out of it. And the next thing I knew, I had a message from her husband that she was no longer in Philadelphia, that a doctor had flown down from Chicago and had taken her back to Chicago and put her in the hospital. Well, there we were, with a theater, sets, costumes, cast, very good cast, and no show. And I remember a nightmare sight. I'll see if I can put it into your head so that you can picture it. Ruth and I walked down to the theater because I was going to meet the company and tell them to hold on. We were going to try to do something. We didn't know what, but just wait a minute. We walked down to the theater, and there at the box office, there was a queue, a line of about 150 people. But as we looked at it, and at the box office, it was like a nightmare sight because all the money was going out of the box office back to the people. Instead of the people putting the money in the box office, the money was going
Getting refunds.
getting refunds, turning in their tickets.
That is a nightmare.
So, well, we talked and thought and what to do, and we didn't have a good understudy. Well, we had an understudy, but not one that you could really picture a run
Right.
on. And then I remembered a little nightclub act that I had seen and adored called The Reviewers. It was Betty Comden, Adolph Green, a boy whose name escapes me, and Judy Holliday. And I thought Judy Holliday was a knockout. So I said to Max Gordon, I think I know a girl who could play it, Judy Holliday. He said, yeah, but he said, well, she doesn't know anything about the play. What are we going to do? I said, I think if she's willing to do it, we could put her in it quickly. I sent for her. She came down with a boyfriend. I gave her the play. She went to a hotel room. She read it. She came down. She looked at me. She said, it's a good play. And I said, well, do you think you could play the part? She said, yes. I said, how quickly do you think you could do it? She said, I don't know, a couple weeks, 3 weeks. I said, could you do it in 4 days? She said, no. I said, would you try? She said, I couldn't do it. I said, well, would you try? She said, all right. So we went to the theater, got the company together, and we rehearsed only her scenes. Just jumped to her scenes all through the play. Paul Douglas, terribly cooperative. Gary Merrill, everybody. Wonderful, as actors usually are in crisis. And we just stayed in the theater. We just had food sent in, and we took showers in the dressing room, and we just stayed there. And then Max Gordon came to me on Saturday morning. He said, listen, kid, we're going to open tonight. I said, no, wait a minute. He said, we got to open tonight. I said, why? He said, look, it's Saturday night. We're out of town. Saturday night, we'll have a big audience. We'll get a lot of laughs. It'll go good. We'll be fine. He said, if we wait till Monday, who knows what we'll get? We'll have a third of a house. It won't look good. It won't feel good. Everybody get discouraged. And I said, well, it's all right with me, but we have Judy to deal with. Well, he said, tell her. I said, how about you tell her? He said, no, you tell her. So I went to Judy, and I said, Judy, I got some news for you. She said, what? I said, we're going to open tonight. She said, no, I don't think I can. I said, oh, you got it. She said, well, all right, I got it. So we opened that night, and it went wonderfully.
Did she have how much of the part did she have memorized by
All
then?
of it.
All of it?
Oh, absolutely.
And how many days later was this?
4 days.
She'd done it in 4 days, in other words.
Yeah. We rehearsed, of
Oh,
course.
I understand, but still, that's a
Yeah.
huge part to learn in that short a time.
Anyway, we opened that night, and then we didn't play to an empty seat for another 3.5 years. So,
Isn't that incredible? Absolutely amazing.
what
you
man has done, man can do.
Well, you had very good instincts then, both as a writer and a director, about her in that part.
Oh, I had every confidence in her. Oh, yeah. She was unique, you know.
She was an amazing
Yeah,
talent, and
yeah.
just right for that part. And of course, it made her famous, and it worked. It was one of those wonderful moments where
Oh, yeah.
she served the play, and then it made her a star.
Yeah. And yet, not to take one whit of accomplishment or genius away from Judy, you know, the part has been played now
I'm sure.
dozens and dozens of times, and many times with equal success.
Oh, I'm sure.
In fact,
So
the
I-
last production on Broadway with Ed Asner
And Madeline Kahn.
and Madeline Kahn was equally effective. Madeline Kahn
Very
beautiful
yes,
performance.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and very original and within
Yeah,
the part.
yeah.
It's interesting. Well, it's one. This is one of those things about a play that has that kind of timeless quality, really, which Born Yesterday does and is proved to have. The parts can be played by different people. in
Yes, I would
different
say
situations.
the two plays that come to mind are Born Yesterday and Hamlet.
I think that's not a bad
no, I think
comparison. I think we can,
Yeah.
so we can live with that. I think. I wanted to ask you because you referred to the production with Ed Asner and Madeline Kahn, which came back to Broadway in 1989. So we're talking about 1946 when it opened and ran, as you say, for 3.5 years, and then 1989. And you have been involved in the theater for long before that, in the 30s, as an actor and director, as you say. But what about, from your observation, the differences in the New York theater between the period that Born Yesterday first opened and when it opened subsequently in 1989?
Well, I can tell you exactly because that's my life.
Right.
I'm a student of the theater. I go to the theater practically every night, and plays that I admire, like you, I go to see 3 or 4 times. What has happened in the intervening space of time is not any particular change in the play. In fact, we didn't change one line of the play. It was tempting from time to time to say, well, let's hike that up a little, make it a reference,
Update it a
current,
little
yeah,
bit.
update. Dangerous, because once you start pulling those threads, who knows what's going to happen. So we didn't change a syllable. But as a student of the theater, I can tell you what's different. The audience.
Oh, really?
The audiences in the present day are quite different from audiences 42 years ago.
In what way?
Well, they're more hip. They've seen more plays. They've seen thousands of movies. They've seen television shows till they run out of their ears. And it's very, very hard to put over a little cliche on them. It's very difficult to show them something they've seen before because they just saw it last week. And they demand freshness, they demand novelty, they demand new excitement. And that is why we were so fortunate to have Ed Asner and Madeline Kahn, because they brought completely new dimensions to those roles. And the very, very good director, John Tillinger, who came in to put them through the paces, wonderfully experienced fellow who understood the play.
How did it feel with you? This is a little parenthesis. How did it feel for you watching another director do this when you had been the original director and knew it so well? Did you admire his work, or did you want to make suggestions? Did you make suggestions to him as a director?
Well, I made a lot of suggestions, but I made them from the point of view of the playwright, not of the director.
As another director.
I certainly didn't interfere with his staging, which
Yes.
was excellent and didn't need
Well, it
any
was
help from
good,
me.
yes.
Yeah. But
So you were able to let go that part of it then when in this most recent production?
easily, because I hate directing.
Oh, really?
Oh.
You did so much of it so well for so long.
Maybe that's why I hate it. Oh no. It seems to me an absolutely feckless occupation to sit out in a darkened auditorium and watch a lot of suffering actors hitting themselves in the head trying to remember the lines and where they go and what they do. Oh, dear.
But you don't feel that way about writing, because you
Not in the
continue
least.
to write every day.
I do write every day. Oh, I write every day because that's my life.
Tell me, though, in terms of talking about the contrast between the 40s and the 80s and the intervening years in terms of the Broadway theater, your observation about the audience as being a key factor, but clearly the structure of the theater has changed a lot, too, in terms
of course
of financing and everything.
Oh, absolutely everything. When I was with, when I was working with Mr. Abbott, and we did those four smash hits
In the 30s, yeah.
Yeah, in 2 seasons. We had 4 smash hits. We did 3 Men on a Horse,
Boy Meets-
Girl, Brother Rat, and Room Service.
Right.
They were 4 smash hits
Within a 2-year period.
in a 2-year period. Now, not one of those plays cost $10,000 to open on Broadway. Now, well, I grant you there are other things too. We used to we used to buy a hot dog for a nickel.
Well, I know, but still.
Now it's $1. So I grant that. And the theater prices, they were $3.30 for a straight play and $4.40 for a musical from now. But something else has changed that worries me more than that. What worries me is this. You and I go to the theater all the time, and we look around the audience. Do you see many young people in the theater?
Not enough, not enough. Too few.
Now, in London, where we went recently, we went to the theater again every night and twice on matinee days. I would say that fully 1/3 of the audience made up of people under 30.
Do you think that what's happened on Broadway, is this because of ticket prices, because of...
Stop right there.
Is that it?
That's it. That's it. Because you can go downtown any evening and go to the ticket booth where tickets are sold at half price. There are always 200 people on
That's
that
right,
line.
in line
Yeah.
to come to the theater.
Yeah. And that isn't an answer, because I know a lot of people who patronize that ticket booth, and they do it because that's the only way they can get to the theater. But they're not content. They're not
Yes.
really satisfied because they don't get good tickets.
Yes. As
They
good
don't
as
get
they
good
would
seats.
paying the full price.
That's
yes.
right. They get seats on the side or in the back or upstairs. They just
It's better than nothing, of course, because
Exactly.
they get to go to the theater.
Now look,
But yes,
it's better than nothing. But as I heard from some young people with whom I was discussing this very question, and they said theater's too expensive, and I said, well, you can always go to the ticket booth. And they said, wait a minute. They said, you go to the ticket booth. All right, you got a girl, and that's a date. So you're taking her out for the evening. So what do? You wind up standing on the line with her? Is that your idea of taking a girl out? Well, I said, well, no.
it's not a big evening on the town.
No. He said, now you finally get over that. So now you go into the theater with your girl, and there you are way up in the back on the side of some lousy seat. You go to the movies, every seat is a perfect seat. You go to Radio City Music Hall, price is about a quarter
Yes.
of what it is for a theater ticket. You've got the best seat in the house, wherever you sit.
What do you feel? We've just got a few minutes left here, and I do want to ask you, because I know you're very interested in young writers, and you're on the council.
I'm a young writer. So
You're a young writer, and you're interested in other young writers.
I am.
And you're on the council of the Dramatist Guild, which is, and you're on there with some wonderful other young writers, Wendy Wasserstein and Pete Gurney and a whole group of people. What do you feel about young writers coming into the theater today? What sort of things would you say to them, or do you say to them when they must ask you for
In the
advice?
first place, I embrace them, and if they're female, I kiss them for their bravery. I think to be a playwright in the current theater takes all the guts that you have to summon. There was a time when you'd open a play and you'd get 8 or 9 reviews, some good, some medium, some bad, enough good to go on. But now we're in a situation where we've got really one reviewer who can just about kill you.
This is the critic of the New York Times.
Yeah. It's not his fault.
No, I
He
understand.
didn't ask to have that authority, but on the other hand, he does have it. If you get a rave review in the New York Times, you're off to the races. If you get a very bad review in the New York Times, you're probably damaged. You're not dead, you're damaged. He didn't happen to like this last revival, the last revival of Born Yesterday. He just didn't respond to it. And curiously enough, since all the other reviewers did, it didn't hurt us very much. It hurt us some.
Yes.
But it didn't kill us.
Right.
We didn't have to close Saturday night. And I think that's very unfortunate.
It is, for these young writers.
Yeah.
What alternatives do the writers have now in terms of, other than Broadway? They have to go somewhere then, don't they?
Well, they could kill themselves. That's the final
But
solution.
I suppose really the regional theater and off Broadway have taken up some of the slack, have they?
Yeah. And let's not pass over that too quickly. because the 35, 40 years ago that we're talking about, the regional theater was minimal. There was very little. There were 5 or 6 theaters around the country that meant anything. But now, there are 200. And they're mostly wonderful. They're terrific theaters. I sometimes have the fantasy of writing plays and not having them play in New York.
But I think some playwrights have really followed that route.
Yeah.
In the last few years.
Yeah, yeah.
Of having that happen.
I applaud them. I think the audiences out there are just as important. Our New York audiences are, of course, they're hip and they're wise to the ways of the world, and they're a very good audience, and they laugh at all the jokes, and they gasp at the suspense parts. But they're also a little bit on the snobbish side, and they lack youth. We don't have enough young people going to the theater in New York, and out of town we do. And so that's why my own leaning is toward the regional theater now.
And do you think that that's really a place of hope then for
I think so.
For writers and actors too, I presume?
Yes, and designers and costume designers and composers, everything. It's a very, very lively world out there.
Well, on that note of hope that we have out in the regional theater, we'll have to close now. I want to thank Garson Kanin. This has been the Harold Clurman Seminar, and I'm Ed Wilson. Thank you very much for being with us.